and welcome back to my channel. So it is the end, well, it's summer now, but the school year is over, even if I'm, a month late or so. But the school year is over, and for the past few years, whenever I have done sort of teaching content during the school year, I have tried to include an end of the year sort of reflection review, and I think that it's really good. It's good for me to take that time to kind of sit and think through what actually worked, and I think it's also good so that you all have a little bit of closure on some of the stuff that I talked about this year. Now, I will say, I don't think I did that much teaching content this year. Like, I think I did less than normal. And part of the reason why I did that is that honestly, my system has been pretty static for the last couple of years. I make a couple of little tweaks here and there, but overall, I have a system that seems to work really well. And because I had new classes this year, but a lot of my stuff is actually really stable. So I thought I would go ahead and do sort of a little wrap up just so that I could close out the school year. But if you are looking for other teaching content, I would definitely check out sort of previous years. I think I have a playlist with all of my teaching content so you can kind of see from year to year to year. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's chat about this year. So this year was interesting in that we were not on lockdown for most of the year. So I know that other schools in France were on sort of like a leapfrogging schedule where they had like rotating on 3 weeks, and some kids were at home and some kids were at school, or maybe it was every other week or what have you. And my school, we were actually in school in person, minus obviously the kids who, the few kids who actually got COVID and the more kids who were what we call a contact case. But we actually had sort of school as normal for most of the year, which is different than last year since we basically lost the back half of the year. And so we did have about a month or 4 or 5 weeks that we were on lockdown, but otherwise we were in school. So that was actually really nice, just in terms of being able to see my kids face to face for most of the year. I think that was really good. I know that at the end of the year, because we did our lockdown kind of late in the year, I think it was April basically, by the time we came back in May, it was like, May is always a weird month here in France because that's like the one month that we have a bunch of bank holidays, and so we'll have like a 4-day week and a 3-day week, and like it's just kind of chaotic. And it's also when, grades start wrapping up, we have testing starting for certain levels, like there's just a lot of stuff going on. And so it was a little tough at the end of the year to kind of come back from lockdown and like try and maintain the kids' attention, and even our attention was like not where it should have been, but just kind of try to maintain kids' attention, knowing that we were nearing the end of the school year. They'd been basically at home for a month, and like when we came back, they had 1 week on, 1 week off until like sort of the end. Like it was just very, very chaotic. Aside from that, the year in general was pretty good. I actually was really, really happy with all of my classes. This is the first year that I had predominantly older students. I had 8th grade through 11th grade. I had kids in every single level. So basically I have 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th Euro, which is sort of 2 extra hours of English a week. And then I also had 10th grade English, and I had 2 11th grade English classes. So most of my hours are, I'm either skewed very much towards high school, or I do Euro classes, which is kind of, it feels like my sweet spot. So that was actually really nice this year. I felt like, even when we had times where things were tough or whatever, like it felt like I was kind of in the right classes. So that was really fantastic. And I'm hoping to keep all of these classes next year. We will find out. I think that school has sent out our sort of preliminary schedules probably yesterday actually, because so today's a holiday in France. I'm filming on July 14th. It's a holiday in France, and our school, like, admin and all of that closed for the summer yesterday. So they usually send out our preliminary schedules the day before they close basically, or the day they close. So because it's really close by, there's a chance I'll get it end of this week, maybe the beginning of next week. So I will kind of get to see like what my schedule is going to look like and all of that, which is going to be great because it starts to help me plan like, do I need to change my filming schedule? Do I need to change like, when I'm planning on doing grocery shopping, or like, it just kind of helps me start planning for next year. Also, I can start putting stuff in my calendar, so that's going to be great. In terms of like curriculum and just planning stuff, so let's focus on curriculum first. So curriculum, I think that I had a lot of, I had one new class well, technically one new class, one new group of kids, but it was actually 2 classes this year. And that was last year I had 2 7th grade classes and I was a head teacher in 7th grade. This year I basically switched all of my 7th graders for 10th graders. And so I was there, I had 1 class of kids and I was their head teacher. I had them for English and then I had them for Euro. So because I haven't had 10th grade since before the reform, I basically had to redo all of my English stuff. I also had to completely do curriculum for Euro stuff because it was the first time I'd ever had them. So those really took a lot of my attention this year. So my other classes that I've had sort of previously, I didn't change a whole lot. I think my 8th and 9th grade, so I hadn't had 9th grade last year, but I had them 2 years ago for the Euro class, and I kept the same curriculum. My 8th graders, my colleague and I have been working a lot on that, and so we kept that the same. So that was really nice to kind of have those 2 classes just sort of ready to go. And then my 11th grade Euro class, I added a new unit, but I didn't really change anything. And I even had a unit that last year, it was the first time I was doing a specific unit, it was on living fiction, so kind of talking about fiction and writing and genres and all of that. We actually did it online because of lockdown, and this year I ended up doing it as my at-home unit, and actually I'll talk about that in a minute. I did it as my at-home unit, so it was like ready to go basically. I did add a unit at the end of the year just because of the way things worked out. And then my 11th grade, I think we switched out a unit, so we added a new unit. We did one that we had planned to do last year that we didn't get to last year, and then we changed a couple of things in another ones. But basically most of my other classes I kind of left as is for right now, and I really focused on my 10th grade because they were my new class. So that is something that if I have all of my same classes again, what I hope to be able to do is, because I won't have to create as many new units and like get all of that ready, is I would like to refine a couple of different units that I either did this year, I was like, yeah, I kind of liked how this went, or like not really sure if I want to do it, or I've been doing it for a few years and I just kind of want to revamp and like revitalize them a little bit. I know that we do have at least 1 or 2 new units that we're doing in 11th grade. I have a colleague that I work with and at the end of every school year we chat about that and we make some changes. And we also would really like to do a culture fair with our 11th grade classes that we want to prototype with our classes and then maybe expand it to all of the 11th grade classes, not next year, but the following year. So have a couple of things I want to change on that. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really hoping that I have all of my same classes so that I can really focus on like making the units that I already have better. In terms of a couple like concrete things that I want to change. So I think that overall I've only been a full-time teacher now for 3 or 4 years at this point, but I've noticed that sort of each year, and especially as I have been skewing more to high school, I have been trying to include more and more kind of social justice units as opposed to just like plain cultural units. So I feel like there was a time when in English we do a lot of things like the royal family, or I don't know, what else would we talk about? Like, I'm trying to even remember what we would talk about. Gap year stuff or whatever. And we are still doing some things like that, but a lot of the new textbooks, which is really great, are actually focusing more on not just like, so for example, we might have talked about Thanksgiving and it would be like the story of the first Thanksgiving and all of that. And rather than doing that anymore, our textbooks now are focusing on, for example, I did a unit with my 10th graders on misconceptions about Native Americans. And so I think that that has been really nice because it's a lot more linked to current events, and it's a lot more linked to like, yeah, we're talking about history and we're talking about Anglophone culture and all of that, but it's not like the sugar-coated like America's great or the American dream, or you know what I mean? Like it's a little bit more focused on like telling the whole story. And so that has been really nice. And so one of the units I did this year, which was misconceptions about Native American culture, I actually had an assignment that I had my kids do that was based in the book that was a written comprehension or a reading comprehension from an excerpt of a book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. I'm gonna link it down below because it's a really long title. It's by Alexie. It is a fantastic book. It's a really long title though, so I might have mixed up one of the words in there, but The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. And I had them do this reading comprehension and I was like, wow, this is a really great thing. Like I hadn't read the book and a colleague of mine had it. it. So I actually just finished reading it a week or two ago, and I really want to sort of revamp that unit and base it around us reading that book, because like the book touches on so many important things about just like how like the US has treated Native Americans and Native American cultures, and like the things that as like someone who is not part of Native American culture, like how we typically view what goes on in reservations and all of that. Like it's a really, really good resource. And so one of the other things I really like is there's reading questions in the book, like there's all sorts of things. So actually I stayed up late one night because I couldn't fall asleep, and I was just writing a bunch of notes of what I want my kids to do with this book. So like on the one hand, I really like it because in 10th grade, it's like the transition year from middle school to high school. And so starting in 11th grade, they actually have like specialty classes that they do. So they'll pick, they'll do extra like physics or philosophy, or like they've got a bunch of different things, but there is actually an English, like it's literature and culture, something like that. It's a literature and culture class. And so in that class, if they do that specialty, they will read entire books in English and like deal with them and like analyze and all of that kind of stuff. But only a small percentage of kids actually take that class. And so because I have the Euro class, typically my kids have a stronger level of English. And so one of the things that I want to do is basically take a book. And so this book that I want to do by Sherman Alexie, it's about 200 pages. So it is a little bit long, but the main character draws cartoons. And so there's cartoons in the book. So it gives you extra information, but it's not just 200 pages of solid block of text. So I think it's going to be a more accessible book for them to read. It's in line with the unit we're already doing, and it's going to be great exposure for the kids who want to do that literature and culture class. They'll already have some practice reading an entire novel in English. And for the kids who don't do it, they'll have exposure to doing it so that they at least had this experience once before they go on to whatever else they're going to be doing. So I think it's going to be a really cool exercise for them to do. I really like the topic matter that it treats, and I think it's going to be a really good just sort of like pragmatic skill for them to have. So that's going to be one where I want to take the original unit that I did, and I want to kind of shift the focus to the book and maybe use the unit that we had in our textbook to have some like supporting documents based on things that they really touch on in the book. But I think that's going to be one unit that I really changed. In terms of 11th grade, as I mentioned, we want to add the culture fair, so that's going to be kind of an end of the year project. But one of the other things that we did is, for example, we've done a unit on Tales from the Sea. So this is a fiction unit, so it focuses on like kind of sea legends in the UK basically. And one of the things that I want to change on that is we have been doing one kind of final task for that, so the final project that they have to do, and I want to kind of just change what I'm doing. Another one is we did a unit on South Africa, and the final project that we did just felt kind of like not focused enough, and so I want to redo that. So in 11th grade, it's less that I'm changing what units I'm actually working on. It's more refocusing, sort of maybe changing a couple of the documents, kind of refining the way that we actually do the final project and all of that kind of stuff. So I have a couple things that we're going to work on with that, and otherwise I'm like, that's going to take some time, but otherwise the majority of my units I'm pretty happy with. I think maybe in another year or two, my 8th and 9th graders, I might kind of change that. And actually I think that 8th grade we might be changing one or two things, but I have to talk to my colleague about that because we work really closely together. We basically do all the same units at the same time, and so if we ever have a unit that is like writing a skit and like acting it out, we actually will have both groups come together and like they'll perform for each other. We have a unit that we do at the end of the year to create a yearbook, and we do an end of the year party, like we let the kids work between the groups and all of that kind of stuff. So that's one that we work really closely together. So I think we might tweak like one or two things, but overall we are kind of happy with how that is going for right now. And because I have Euro classes from 8th through 11th grade, I also have to kind of keep in mind, if I change something in one class, I have to make sure I'm not like repeating a topic that I will then maybe do in future years, kind of thing. So that is going pretty well. One of the other things I'm going to be working on, sort of not necessarily changing my curriculum, but sort of adapting how I present it, is I have been working on a sort of beginning of the year PowerPoint that I'm going to show. It's basically going to be sort sort of that first class that we have is talking about how we function in English class. And I actually worked on it with one of the colleagues that I work really closely with as well, and we kind of like brainstormed and added stuff in. So I'm going to make it sort of available for anybody in the team who wants to use it, but it is going to be very specifically to how I function in class, and it's going to have a lot in like, you know, how I use my PowerPoints and like what I expect when they come in and all of that kind of stuff. So one of the things that I started doing at sort of halfway point through the year with my high school kids is I started adding icons to my PowerPoint. So I have a PowerPoint that goes up and it has the intro slide for the day. So it's got the date, it's got what we're going to be doing, if they have any homework and all of that. And then we go through, and so every activity that I have sort of the explanation. If it's something that we're doing in the book, a lot of times I'll rewrite the questions, because then if kids ask, I can like point, oh, like this is a word you don't understand, we're going to talk about that, or like this is the question, like these are the questions that we have to do, does everybody understand, and all of that. And so what I've added in the last couple of months is an icon. So for example, if we're doing a reading comprehension that I want us to read the text out loud as a class, and then they're going to work in pairs and answer the questions, what I'm going to have is, you know, the first step is going to be read the text as a class, and then I have an icon that I use for classwork, and I have an icon that I use for reading, so that they know, like they can look at these icons and see like, okay, this is what we're doing. Because some of my kids are still, even in, and I want to start doing this with kind of all of my levels, but even in 11th grade, they've been taking English for a really long time, but some of my kids still get sort of that like, I see a bunch of English on the screen and oh my gosh, what's happening? And so I want to sort of give them that visual cue of like, this is what we're doing on, and use the same icons every single time. So we went through with my colleague, we went through and we kind of picked out like, okay, what are the icons we want to use? So we have an icon for the type of work it is. So is it classwork? Is it pair work? Is it group work? Is it individual work? We have an icon for, so the, how are we working on this thing? So the individual, class, group work, etc. What type of activity is it? So are we reading something? Are we listening to something? Are we watching something? And any other information. So if it is something that you need to take notes for, I've got a little writing thing, or even if it's a writing activity, they would have a writing thing, obviously. So we sometimes will use, I'll let them use their phones, because our textbooks now, they will let you scan the document and you can watch the video or listen to the document at your own pace. So sometimes I do things where we listen or we watch as a class, and sometimes I have them do it in small groups. And so I'll put on there and like, okay, you need your phone, or like you can't use your phone, and that kind of thing. So that is something that I really want to focus on at the beginning of the year, where I really go through all of that. Like when I say classwork, this is what I mean. You know, if you're not talking, you need to be listening. If you want to talk, you need to raise your hand. If we're doing group work, that means you need to use, you know, quiet voices. We need to not be screaming. Like you need to be focused on the work. You need to be respecting whether or not, like, have I said that you can use your phone or not? If I said you can't use your phone, I shouldn't see any phones. And so trying to get those kind of guidelines set up at the beginning of the year, and even talking about things like, I expect when kids come into class, so I basically go to their classroom, but there are times where they're on break and they come back and like, I'm there kind of thing. Or when I come in, like, what do I expect you to do? And so for my class, I expect them to come in, get their stuff out, sit down, and be ready to work. Like, I might be working on different stuff, but I should not like look up and see 10 kids like, you know, throwing paper airplanes or doing whatever because they're waiting for me to tell them to be quiet and get down to work. Like, I expect them to do that, especially in high school. And so that's something that I have tried to kind of model that behavior, but I think it just needs to be more explicit, because what makes sense in my brain and like what worked with me as a student, like if I went into a class and we did the same thing 3 times in a row, I would just assume that that was the routine in class. And I feel like that doesn't actually happen here. And also because I'm not French, and I teach English and I'm not French, so I don't have that like basis of like, I have no idea what actually goes on in classrooms like with a French teacher, because I've never done it. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't in the school system. And so I think that I'm also asking them to do something that's very different in a lot of cases from what they're used to doing with another teacher. So I really want to focus that on that in the beginning of the year, and see if that kind of helps with some of the like frustrations that I have during the year, because I think I've been clear, but they're not doing, or they're not behaving the way that I kind of expect them to behave. And also to have them be able to have like really clear expectations of what I want them to do in class. So that's something I'm going to be working on as well this summer. So I think that's kind of a good overview of the curriculum side. In terms of planning, I am going to be making my bullet journal again this year. I really liked how it worked. I really liked the teeny tiny monthly, actually worked really well. I didn't need more space than that because I do rely heavily on my Google Calendar, but just in terms of like seeing how soon things are coming up, it really helps me to have that view where I can like flip back and forth easily. So I'm gonna keep that. The weeklies worked really well. I had plenty of room for writing down the tasks I had to do. I had plenty of room for writing in what we're gonna do in each class. Like it worked out super duper well. My attendance, I am not entirely sure how I want to fix that. Basically the issue was most of my classes are at least 35 kids. And my tracker for attendance only has 32 kids. So either I need to see if I can figure out how to squeeze 35, and like if I have 36 or 37 kids, then I'm kind of out of luck. But at least if I only have 35, then I'm good to go, or maybe try and fit 36. Or if I'm going to just do what I did this year, which is basically I kind of counted out as many pages as I thought I would need, and I did the first, 32 kids, and then I just had a last section for the rest of the kids. It was very messy. It was kind of annoying. I'd love to have it all on one page, but we'll see. So I am going to keep my attendance in my bullet journal because if I don't have that, my bullet journal is really, really thin. And so this way, keeping it all in together, it means I have one fewer notebook than I would normally have. So I want to do that and see. This year, I'll try it again. If I still can't get it to work right, then I might go back to my old school way, which was getting a little A5 grade book and using that for attendance. We shall see. Also, I had plenty of room for notes. I didn't leave myself a ton of notes pages, but I actually still had, I don't know, at least 10 or 15 left over at the end of the year. So that actually worked out really well as well. I am also going to be using the A4 grade book that I have been using forever. I just really like that in terms of like actual grades. It gives me, because I do bonus points, because I sometimes will do corrections, I need more space. I really don't want to downsize to a smaller notebook at this point. The one thing is the stationery stores in my town have not had the same stock that they normally have. One of my stores had like a quarter of the stock that they normally had because they're going to be going out of business at some point in the near future-ish. They don't know exactly when, which is a bummer because I really like them. And the store I ended up getting my book from, they only had like 4 left, and it was only the 9-class version. So unfortunately, I'm going to have a grade book that's going to have 2 extra classes, which is kind of annoying, but I just, yeah, I don't have that many stationery stores in my town, and so I was like, I'd rather just like buy it and get it and make sure I have it, because if I wait too much longer, they're gonna be out of stock. So overall, I would say that between my planning system and my curriculum and all of that, it was a pretty good year. I really, really enjoyed having this 10th grade class. They are a really good bunch of kids, and it was nice having them for so many hours. It did get a little bit confusing sometimes because, for example, on one day of the week, we would have 2 hours in a row, but technically the first hour was Euro class and the second hour is English. And so what I actually ended up doing for them is I just made a little sign, and I think I actually saved it and I'm planning to use it next year, where I would just put it up on the top of the board and it would say either English or Euro, so they would know which notebooks they had to get out. They would know like either did they need their textbook or did they need the documents I gave them the previous class and all of that. So aside from that, it was actually really nice to have them for so many hours because I feel like we got to do some really cool projects that I maybe wouldn't have been able to do with another class, just sort of by virtue of having them for so many hours during the week. Oh, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention, which I don't know if this is going to be a thing that happens again next year, but if it is, well, I'll be ready for it. So one of the things that I did is we had sort of lockdown, and we actually had 2 weeks where everyone was at home. So they basically moved up our holidays, and we had a week before and the week after where everyone was at home. And then there was a month or so after where we had sort of every other. So the way that my school did it is each class was split in half. So my 10th grade class was split in half. And basically the front of the alphabet was group 1 and the back of the alphabet was group 2. They just kind of did it like that. And so basically I would have 1 week where I would have group 1 in class and group 2 at home, and then the following week they would switch. It was a little bit of a hard thing to like wrap my head around about like who am I actually seeing and all of that. And so what I ended up doing in order to sort of make my life easier, and it did, like, on the one hand, it did make my life easier. On the other hand, it did require extra prep work. But I still, honestly, if I had to do this again next year, I would do it the same way because I think it worked just better for my brain at least. So rather than trying to figure out a way of having my curriculum that I'm doing in class have a way of doing it at home as well, I actually ran 2 parallel units. So I had a unit that I would do with the kids in class, and I had a unit that I would do with them at home. And the reason that I did this is because, one, the way that I am going to have the kids work through a unit in class is very different from the way that I'm going to have them do it at home. And so it would have required doing a lot more work, and I would basically get through the same amount of material, so I'd have to have that material every single week. So that would mean I would have to create in home and in class for the same material every single week. Whereas if I did 1 unit at home and 1 unit in class, I basically had 2 weeks. I had to prepare 2 weeks of material, and I did it at home with this group and then at home with the other group and then in class with this group and in class. You know what I mean? Like I could kind of run it parallel, and so I had twice the content, but it actually took me less prep time because once I prepped 1 week of in class and at home, it actually worked for the second week as well. So that actually, it just worked out better. So basically what I ended up doing is for my 10th and 11th grade classes, my 10th grade class, because I have the same group of kids for English and Euro, I basically just said, okay, we had this unit that we were working on in class, we're gonna finish that up, and it's an English unit, so we're gonna do a Euro unit at home, and then we finished the English unit and we finished the Euro unit, and then I kind of switched them. So I just had them do one thing at home and one thing in class. My 11th graders, I had a unit that we were working on, and I started then a new unit in class, and then I started a brand new unit at home for them, and ditto with my 11th grade Euro classes. So that was kind of how I worked that out. I tried to keep the unit that was going to be more necessary for us to talk about stuff. So either it was going to have a lot more specialized vocabulary, or just like the sort of documents were things that I wanted to work with them in class. Tried to keep those in class. And then with my at-home units, I actually ended up doing sort of Netflix based. So my 11th graders, they did a unit on biopics. So they had a bunch of texts that they had to read and some interviews to listen to and all of that. And then their final project, I basically had them choose a biopic that has already been made, watch it. And I basically was like, do whatever you want. Like if you have Netflix, choose one that's on Netflix. If you have Prime, choose one that's on Prime, like however you want to do this. Watch it and then give me a sort of a reaction, like what did you like about it? What didn't you like? Would you recommend this to a friend? So that was kind of a way of doing something that I was like, well, I know they're at home anyway. Why not ask them to watch a movie as part of the assignment? And then my 10th graders, one of the units that we did at home, so we had a short unit that was on inventions that was kind of designed to be an at-home unit that a colleague gave to me. So that actually kind of cleared things up because I had to get the in-class stuff ready for my 10th graders. And then after I finished the inventions unit, we actually did a unit on American TV series, looking at binge watching, like this whole idea of like, what is binge watching and how is that developed and all of that. Looking at TV tourism, so people who go to the filming sites for like Game of Thrones, and I know this isn't a TV series, but like Lord of the Rings, for example, would be another one. So kind of different documents about that. And then trying to remember, I had them just write a summary of the last TV show that they watched and what they liked about it and what they liked about the episode. And that was kind of the way I tried to do something that was going to be sort of in line with stuff that they might be doing at home already. And then I kept sort of the other stuff that was a little bit more like serious, I guess. I kept that to do at home so that I could really discuss about like the cultural aspects and the vocabulary and all of that kind of stuff. And so that, if this is a thing that happens again, that is the way that I'm going to do it. It honestly makes my life so much easier to just run those 2 parallel units, because then like honestly it worked out better. It is a little bit more work getting everything set up, but yeah. And so what I also tried to do is for most of the at-home units, so my 11th grade Euro, it was a unit that I had already done last year on lockdown, so I just used that again. The other 2, so 10th and 11th grade English, I ended up using a unit. One of them was a unit I hadn't planned at all to do in class, so that doesn't mess up my normal curriculum. The other one, the TV series one, is actually one I was planning on doing with them in class. And so next year, I will just have to change that to an in-class version, assuming we aren't on lockdown again. But that was kind of one of the ways I tried to do things that were going to not add more work to myself, because I was also still having to create units and lesson plans for in class. So that was one thing I did want to touch on before the end of this video. But yeah, other than that, I think that the year went pretty well in terms of planning not really much I'm going to change. In terms of curriculum, I do have a couple of things I want to do, you know, a couple of units that I did at home I need to transfer and like kind of adapt to an in-class thing. I have 1 or 2 units that I want to sort of switch out for something new, so I'll have a couple I have to work on. So that is going to be one of the things that I work on sort of maybe the end of this week, probably getting into the end of July, is I am planning on sort of setting up my week so that I do, you know, 3 to 6 hours of work on lesson planning sort of every week, and then I have time to do, you know, filming if I need to film, and going for walks and seeing friends, because I'll be past my 2 weeks of my vaccine as of tomorrow, which is really cool. And, you know, I don't know, planning stuff and sewing stuff, just like all the other stuff I want to do, but the idea is going to be to sort of space out my planning so that I don't have to do, well, I might still, but I'd like to not have to do a marathon like the week before school starts. I'd like to try and do a couple of hours each week and just like sort of make headway. So in terms of the things that I really need to do, obviously the units that I want to update, I need to update my syllabi. I need to make sure that my PowerPoints are ready to go. The way that I like to do it is I like to get all of my documents prepped for the entire unit, print out my originals at home, and then I go and make photocopies. With some of my classes, I do use a textbook, so there's very few documents to print out. I'm trying really hard to do that as much as possible. If there's a unit in the book that I really like, I try and use that as much as possible because the kids get the book, and so I don't have to make as many photocopies. But there are always a couple of things I have to do photocopies for. But what I like to do is basically have the entire unit ready to go, and I basically will do sort of in August when the school opens up again. I hope to have all of my first units for all of my classes ready to go. So I basically just go up and I go, hopefully when there aren't that many people, and make photocopies of all of my stuff and have all the first units ready. And then as I start going through, I'll start, you know, bring up the stuff to do all the second units and all the third units and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, the other thing I have to do is actually file and clean out all of my stuff for this year. But that is something that will probably happen. Maybe that'll be what I end up doing this week to kind of get things like wrapped up completely for last year, and then I can kind of focus on this year. So that is my wrap up for this school year. If you're a teacher, I hope that that was helpful. If you're not a teacher and you watch this anyway, thank you. I hope that you found it at least interesting to kind of get a behind the scenes in the life of a teacher sort of thing. And yeah, I will see about some more teaching content, you know, kind of in the summer and getting into September and all of that. But for now, that is all I have. So I will see you in my next video. Bye. Hey guys, so if you've made it all the way to the end of this video and are actually watching my end screen and you're not subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate it if you would. There's a little button right there for you to do it. And if you're interested in watching some more of my videos, I have links to 2 of my older videos off to the left there, so you can check those out if you would like to, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.